Have you ever come home and found your pillow torn apart, your shoe chewed up, or that same corner of the wall scratched again? And the first thing that crossed your mind was, he did this on purpose. You probably looked at him with that mix of anger and exhaustion, thought this dog is impossible, and went to clean up the mess without really understanding what actually happened there. Most owners assume these behaviors are a lack of training, or too much energy, or simply the way the dog is. But that's wrong. What animal behavior science has been showing over the past few decades is that most of these signs have nothing to do with bad behavior. They are symptoms. Symptoms of a mind asking for help in a way the owner hasn't yet learned to read. And the problem is, as long as you don't learn to read these signs, you keep responding to the wrong thing. You keep punishing the symptom. You keep frustrating the animal, and the cycle doesn't stop. In this video, you'll discover 7 signs that indicate your dog needs more mental stimulation and why each one says much more about your bond than it seems at first glance. You'll leave here seeing your dog in a way that will never be the same again. But I'm saving the most important one for the end because it's the quietest signal of all, the one most owners never stop to notice, and the one that, once you understand it, will make everything that happens in your daily life together take on a completely different meaning. Have you ever come home and found something destroyed, and your dog was there looking at you with that expression that seems like he doesn't understand why you're upset? Yeah. The explanation most owners carry is simple. He's messy. He has too much energy. He does this to annoy me. But these explanations have a serious problem. They put the focus on the owner's response, punishment, correction, without ever touching the real cause. From an evolutionary standpoint, dogs are cognitive working animals. That means their brains have been shaped over thousands of years to solve problems, to track, to scent, to hunt, to herd, to pull sleds. Every breed carries a function in its DNA, and along with that function, a neurological need to actively use its mind. When that need isn't met, the canine brain doesn't just shut off and wait. It finds an outlet, and the most accessible outlet, the one that's always available, is the home environment. The pillow, the couch, the shoe, the leg of the table. Destruction isn't misbehavior. It's misdirected problem solving. The behavior you interpret as "he did this to annoy me" is actually the equivalent of a highly skilled engineer being placed in an empty room for 8 hours a day. At some point, he's going to start doing something with whatever is at hand, because the human brain, just like the canine brain, doesn't tolerate cognitive vacuum for long. The difference is that the engineer can complain. Your dog can only chew. When you understand this, destruction stops looking like a behavior problem and starts looking like what it really is, a message. He's not challenging you, he's asking you for something to do. And here's where it gets even deeper, because the next sign looks completely different but comes from exactly the same root. Have you ever had a neighbor complain about your dog's barking, or come home and he just wouldn't stop, for no apparent reason, no one at the door, nothing going on? The most common explanation for excessive barking at nothing is what owners usually believe. My dog is anxious. He has a bad temperament. He barks at everything. But think about this for a second. If barking were purely anxiety, it would happen consistently, tied to specific triggers, in recognizable patterns. What animal behavior researchers have identified in understimulated dogs is a different pattern. Compulsive vocalization, barking that seems to have no clear trigger and that intensifies during long periods of inactivity. This pattern has a technical name, cognitive frustration, and the mechanism is simpler than it sounds. When the canine brain is deprived of sufficient stimulation, it enters a heightened state of alert. The senses become hypersensitive, small noises turn into threats, movement at the window becomes an event. A mind with nothing to process starts processing everything with disproportionate intensity. Studies on dogs in low enrichment environments show a significant increase in compulsive vocal behaviors compared to dogs that receive regular cognitive challenges. The variable wasn't breed, it wasn't temperament, it was mental stimulation. Excessive barking isn't your dog being difficult, it's the alarm of a nervous system overloaded by lack of real use. Think about the contrast. A dog that spends the day solving mental challenges, even simple ones, reaches the evening with a calibrated mind. A dog that spent 8 hours in total silence reaches the afternoon with its senses on edge. He's not barking at nothing, he's barking because he had nothing all day. When you understand this difference, your response changes completely. You stop trying to silence the symptom and start asking what's missing. But the next sign is where things start to get really serious, because it's the one that most closely resembles normal behavior and is actually one of the clearest warnings there is. Have you ever noticed that your dog has a circuit? That he walks in circles or follows the same path over and over again? He goes from the couch to the window, from the window to the kitchen, back to the couch, and repeats, day after day, always the same route, almost like a ritual. Most owners either don't notice or they find it amusing. That's just how he is. It's not. This behavior has a name in ethology, the science of animal behavior, and that name is stereotypy or stereotypy. And here's what makes this serious. Stereotypies are observed in animals in captivity that live in cognitively impoverished environments. Bears in zoos pacing back and forth endlessly, elephants swaying their heads in a constant rhythm, primates moving in repetitive, purposeless patterns. The mechanism behind these repetitions is the same across species. When an animal cannot express its natural behaviors, hunting, exploring, solving, interacting, the nervous system finds an outlet, and that outlet is repetitive movement, a form of self-regulation that the brain uses when it doesn't have enough external stimulation to process. Read that again. The same mechanism you see in captive animals is happening in your living room, not because you're a bad owner, but because the structure of modern domestic life simply wasn't designed to meet the cognitive needs of an animal that spent millennia working. A dog that develops a fixed route isn't doing it out of harmless habit. He's creating the only type of stimulation he can generate on his own, repetitive kinetic stimulation, because the environment around him offers nothing else. It's the mind creating work where there is no work. And when you stop to think about that, when you really stop, it's hard not to feel the weight of it. If this resonated with you, consider subscribing to the channel. We post every week to help dog owners understand what their animals are trying to tell them before the signs turn into bigger problems. But the next sign is where things take a turn most owners would never expect. Because it seems completely harmless, it even looks cute. Have you ever seen your dog frozen, completely still, staring intensely at a shadow on the wall? Or chasing the reflection of your phone's light on the ceiling for minutes on end, unable to stop even when you put the phone away? The first reaction for almost every owner is to find it funny, to record a video, to send it to friends. But here's what most people don't know. This obsessive fixation on objects, shadows, or lights, especially when it repeats, when the dog can't disengage even when you call, when it appears with increasing frequency and intensity, isn't play. It's compulsive redirection. Predatory behavior in dogs involves a complex cognitive sequence: tracking, chasing, capturing, finishing. This sequence is neurological. It exists in the canine brain whether the animal hunts or not. And when it doesn't find proper expression, when the brain has no opportunity to execute this cycle in a satisfying way, it starts running fragments of that sequence with whatever stimulus is available: a shadow, a reflection, a point of light. The problem is that these stimuli never complete the cycle. The dog chases but never captures, tracks but never resolves, and the cycle stays in a loop, open, never closed, which creates a state of neurological activation that feeds itself. This is particularly common in breeds with high cognitive drive, border collies, Australian shepherds, Malinois, but it's not limited to them. Any dog with unmet cognitive needs can develop this pattern. And here's the detail that matters most.
The more this behavior repeats without intervention, the more it consolidates as a neural pattern. What started as redirection becomes a compulsive habit, and compulsive habits are much harder to redirect than early-stage behaviors. What looks cute today may be a signal you wish you had noticed sooner. I'll come back to this point about what happens when the pattern becomes ingrained in the next item, because that's where most owners get the biggest surprise.
You did the right thing. You took your dog out for a walk. An hour of walking, sometimes more. He ran, sniffed, burned energy. You came home convinced he was going to rest, and he didn't. He stayed agitated, jumping, pushing, impossible to ignore, and you were left confused. I did everything right. What else does he want? Hyperactivity even after physical exercise. Here's what most owners don't know. Physical fatigue and cognitive fatigue are two completely different things, and a tired body without a tired mind does not produce real rest. Animal behavior science has a concept for this: environmental enrichment. And what decades of research with dogs show is that activities that cognitively challenge the animal produce a level of relaxation that pure physical exercise simply cannot replicate. A widely cited study in the field compared groups of dogs subjected to intense physical exercise with groups exposed to cognitive work, puzzle feeders, nose work, chained commands. The result was consistent. Dogs in the cognitive group showed calmer behavior and longer rest periods after the sessions, even though they had moved physically less. A tired mind rests. A tired body with an active mind does not. And here's the emotional dimension of this that most owners don't stop to process. You may be investing time, energy, and genuine dedication into your dog and still leaving his most important need completely unmet, not out of neglect, but because you didn't know it existed. Walks are essential, but walks take care of the body. What takes care of the mind is something else. And the next sign is probably the one that will make you rethink that moment that happens every week in your house, the one you've always interpreted in a completely different way. You call him, he doesn't come. You say, sit. He looks at you and doesn't sit. And you're absolutely sure he knows these commands, because last week he did them perfectly. He does them during training. Sometimes he even does them in front of visitors. But today, here, right now, nothing. The conclusion most owners jump to is immediate. He's challenging me. He's stubborn. He's doing it on purpose. He selectively ignores commands he already knows. But think about it carefully. An animal that performs a behavior correctly in some contexts and not in others isn't being defiant. It's communicating something about its internal state in that specific moment. And here's the real mechanism, supported by what animal neuroscience has been showing about neural plasticity in dogs. The canine brain operates at different levels of engagement. When the animal is cognitively stimulated, when the mind is active and responsive, it processes commands easily and executes them with precision. When the animal is in a state of chronic understimulation, when the mind has been idle for too long, the level of engagement drops. And familiar commands, which offer no new challenge, no sufficient cognitive reward, simply can't compete with anything else happening in the environment at that moment. It's not stubbornness, it's disengagement. It's the equivalent of asking someone who is extremely bored to perform a repetitive task they've already done hundreds of times, with no reason, no visible purpose, nothing that makes it interesting. Compliance will be low. Not because the person is difficult, but because the human brain, just like the canine brain, responds to relevance and novelty. This also ties back to something I mentioned earlier when talking about fixation on shadows and lights. When the pattern of understimulation becomes ingrained, the animal's neural responsiveness decreases overall. The dog that compulsively chases shadows is often the same one that selectively ignores commands, because both are expressions of the same state, a mind that has lost calibration due to lack of proper use. He's not ignoring you. He's telling you that his mind has stopped caring about what doesn't challenge it.
And now we arrive at the seventh sign. This is the one I mentioned at the beginning, the quietest one, the one that looks like the most normal thing in the world, but hides, underneath it, the most direct message your dog has ever sent you.
You're sitting on the couch, or working, or in the kitchen, and suddenly you notice he's looking at you. A fixed gaze, with no apparent reason, still, quiet, with that steady look right into your eyes that doesn't go away even when you look back. And you think, how cute, he just wants attention. He loves me. That's not wrong, but it's incomplete. And what's missing from that interpretation changes everything. The science of Canine social cognition, the field that studies how dogs process interactions with humans, has identified something extraordinary over the past 2 decades. Dogs are the only non-primate species that evolved to use eye contact with humans as a primary tool of intentional communication. This isn't an accident. It's the result of a coevolutionary process of at least 15,000 years. Dogs that were able to communicate with humans through eye contact survived and reproduced more. The gaze isn't just affection, it's language. And here's what that specific, prolonged, fixed gaze, the one that appears during moments of inactivity when the environment is quiet and there's nothing to do, is communicating. I need you to give me something to do. Researchers studying cognition and interspecies communication in dogs have documented this pattern repeatedly. The initiation gaze, distinct from an affectionate gaze by its duration, intensity, and context, appears more frequently in dogs in states of understimulation. It's the animal using the most sophisticated communicative tool it has to try to initiate a purposeful interaction. He's not looking at you because he's bored in a passive way. He's looking at you because he chose you, because he learned over thousands of years of shared evolution that the solution to cognitive emptiness is on the other side of the connection with a human. Because for him, the gaze isn't decorative, it's a request. Think about how many times you've seen that look and looked away. Not out of cruelty, because you didn't know what it meant. That moment was never small for him, and it shouldn't be small for you. Because every time you respond to that gaze with a simple challenge, a game, a moment of real attention, you're answering the question he silently asks every day. Are you here with me? And the answer you give to that question defines, more than anything else, the quality of the bond between you. If you made it this far, you no longer see your dog the same way. And that's exactly why this channel exists. Every week, we publish a new video to help dog owners understand what their animals are trying to communicate before the signs turn into problems and before important moments go unnoticed. If this resonated with you, subscribe. It's free, and every video you don't watch is a conversation your dog is having alone. And tell me in the comments, which of the 7 signs did you recognize in your dog? The fixed stare? The destruction? The hyperactivity that doesn't go away even after a walk? Write it down below, because sometimes naming what you're seeing is the first step to changing it.